Well, it's not as high as you might think. I've been there many times, and obviously there are so many thousands of people, some say 70 to 100,000 people a day visit some part of the World Trade Center, work there, and as a consequence, this is one of those places that you have to have free egress and access to the building. So there are trade-offs with security, and certainly the airspace around it. It's very easy to divert out of the flight pattern going into LaGuardia or one of the surrounding airports and veer off and go toward the World Trade Center.
We've got reports coming in on the Reuters news agency that a Palestinian group has claimed responsibility for the New York World Trade Center attacks. Those are unconfirmed, I must stress. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I suspect that we may see this as Islamicist terrorism. And of course, if that's the case, I think that there's going to be hell to pay in the weeks and months ahead. I don't think that this is the kind of terrorist attack that the United States will take quietly. I think it's basically amounts to a declaration of war, and I think it will be seen that way by the Bush administration.
Well, President Bush, speaking just a short while ago, said that the U.S. would hunt down those who committed the attack on the World Trade Center, but it's not going to be easy.
Well, it won't be easy, but I suspect that we may be able to hunt them down. We've been able to do that in other recent terrorist cases. And if we find the governments have harbored or supported the terrorists in any way, I think those governments become extremely vulnerable at that point.
For viewers who've just joined us, we're going to show you pictures of the second plane as it flew in and appears deliberately to have gone straight into the side of one of the towers. Earlier, another plane had targeted the other tower. You can see an enormous explosion as a direct consequence of that hit. An eyewitness told us it did not look like an accident to her. Still on the line with us is terrorism expert Neil Livingston. The second such attack against the World Trade Center. It must be really quite horrific for the people there at the moment.
Well, we can only imagine what it's like. We have some early reports of absolute pandemonium, absolute chaos, injured people, smoke filling the buildings. Both towers, as you know, are on fire. I think that the loss of life is going to be horrific, and we can only speculate right now on the casualties, and they have our prayers, of course.
Neil Livingston, thank you for joining us. And Ash Raven, who was an eyewitness to the earlier explosion, joined us, and this is what he told us.
Well, I just got off the train right in the belly at the World Trade Center, the train that was getting me in from home this morning. And first, there was just a tremendous smell of gasoline and petroleum. But we just figured that was sort of a train situation. So we were making ourselves up rather calmly on those large escalators, and suddenly there was a sort of a panic run by the rest of the commuters, and then there was a huge explosion. And as we sort of rushed out of the building, we saw what looked like a ticker tape parade, papers and streamers flowing everywhere. It just looked so surreal, but then the sheer fear and, I guess, the panic of the situation, but most of us just ran to side corridors and stuff like that outside on the street. And then moments later, there was another explosion. So all we could see was a tremendous pall of smoke and certainly fire under that smoke in one of the towers of the building. But I got the impression that as I kept running towards my office, more and more people were saying that the second tower had caught on fire as well. I had no idea as to the planes and so on and so forth. We just thought it was some sort of an explosion or a regular fire. But then again, all of downtown looks like a whole mass of people on the street. Trucks, cars, all just strewn around, a pall of black smoke that looks like a tornado climbing over the rest of Wall Street. I could actually now see it from my window. I'm now in my office, a little away from the World Trade Center, about a block away. And I could see through my window, and I could see just humanity right downstairs, just strewn with people, cars and trucks and so on and so forth, lots of confusion, and I guess I still don't know what is going on there.
It's a very, very busy time of morning, of course, isn't it, Ash?
You couldn't have Victor, well, yes, a busier time this morning, so that is really unfortunate. I just hope and I pray for those people in those 2 or 3 floors, or perhaps even more floors, that were affected the World Trade Center. This is such a stark coincidence for me, because I was there when the explosion went off in the World Trade Center many, many years ago, and I had to walk down 63 floors from the 63rd floor of World Trade Center number 2 with the rest of my colleagues, and that was then. And today, I happen to be in the same building. How could that possibly be? The same building, right at the belly of the building, getting off the train.
How many floors appear to be affected?
Just from a sort of a quick visual glance at the building, when I was outside the building, it looked more like 6 or 7, with a real heavy fire and a thick black ball of smoke. But apparently now, I've been hearing this from people on the street. I'm not sure how credible those observations are, that it's clearly more floors, and certainly another building as well, another tower, the 2nd tower.
Eyewitness Ash Raven. Now we're going to cross to Washington. There are pictures there of a hotel behind the Pentagon. There are reports of a terrorist attack on the Pentagon as well. There certainly has been an explosion. You can see thick smoke coming out from behind the Pentagon. It's been evacuated, and there are reports coming through that the White House too has been evacuated. This just a short while after 2 planes attacked the World Trade Center in New York. President Bush said earlier that they were apparent terrorist attacks. It now looks as if the focus of these attacks, if that's what they are, has switched to Washington, to the nerve center of the American government, to the Pentagon, the defense headquarters, and possibly to the White House itself. Joining us now is aviation expert Robert Houston. Robert, what can you tell us about the World Trade Center attacks?
The World Trade Center attack seems to be an astonishingly well-planned, a daring and appalling act. Some of the descriptions that I've heard describe the aircraft involved as small passenger aircraft, but it's far more serious than that. The 2nd aircraft that hit the towers, which there is film of, which some of your viewers may have seen, that is a Boeing 737. It is not a small aircraft. It's a 100-seat airliner, and obviously a very calculated multiple hijacking plan with a suicide attack at the end of it has been put into place by whoever is behind this.
Robert Houston, can you stay with us? We're going to cross to Washington now, where we're getting reports of attacks, possible attacks on the Pentagon. We're joined now by the BBC's John Lyne. John, what can you tell us?
Okay, I'm at Washington National Airport, which is less than a mile from the Pentagon building, which is the headquarters, of course, of the U.S. Defense Department. There's a huge pall of smoke coming from that direction, and people at this airport are saying that a Boeing 757 jetliner has crashed into the Pentagon. Now, I cannot confirm that. Certainly something very bad has happened there. There's a horrible smell here. There's a huge pall of smoke, and there's obviously been some awful thing happened there, but I can't precisely confirm because I cannot see the Pentagon building directly in my line of sight. But certainly from that area, there is a massive pile of smoke. They've shut down this airport. I was just trying to get a plane to New York. They've shut down this airport immediately. There are no plane movements, and they're evacuating the area. It looks as if something very nasty has happened here today indeed.
John, thank you for that. We're looking at pictures from Washington, from just behind the Pentagon, the defense headquarters in the United States. John Lyne is at Washington Airport. John, the defense headquarters would be an extraordinary target. We've lost John Lyne. With me in the studio, though, is the BBC's Jim Fish. Jim, a series of coordinated attacks.
It looks very much like it, yes. An extraordinary amount of, as the defense expert was saying, the aviation expert just then, an extraordinary amount of coordination required to hijack, if that's the case, not 1 but 3 aircraft and crash them into such high-profile targets within minutes or within the space of an hour of each other. One thing, of course, people will now be looking at the perpetrators, the possible perpetrators of these attacks. And they do bear the same hallmark of the twin attacks, if you recall, back in 1998 on the two US embassies in East Africa, in Nairobi, Kenya, and in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, which took place within minutes of each other, but several hundred miles apart. They also caused large numbers of casualties. They were blamed by the American authorities on Middle East terrorists, possibly on Osama bin Laden, the Saudi dissident now thought to be in Afghanistan. If these attacks are also to be put down to the same organization, I'm sure that American officials will be looking very carefully at that possibility, the possibility that Osama bin Laden may have been involved in this. But of course, at the moment, it's far too early to tell.
So reports coming in on the Reuters news agency that a Palestinian group has claimed responsibility for the New York World Trade Center attacks. Those are unconfirmed, I must stress. What's your reaction to that?
Trade-offs with security, and certainly the airspace around it. It's very easy to divert out of the flight pattern going into LaGuardia or one of the surrounding airports and veer off and go toward the World Trade Center.
We've got...
Well, I suspect that we may see this as Islamicist terrorism, and of course, if that's the case, I think that there's going to be hell to pay in the week. Well, it's not as high as you might think. I've been there many times, and obviously there are so many thousands of people, some say 70 to 100,000 people a day visit some part of the World Trade Center, work there, and as a consequence, this is one of those places that you have to have free egress and access to the building. So there are